Hey guys, what's up? It's Schla, and today I'm bringing you another episode of Car Rides with Schla. Today is a fairly exciting day. I plan on recording my video that I think it's going to put me on the mark today. And we'll see how that goes. And I'm also doing something very mysterious that I told you guys about. So I left work early. It's a lot earlier than I usually leave. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. Of course, you don't know what it is. But that's okay, right? Y'all don't gotta know everything. Although, I guess you'll know someday, because someday everything is about everybody is going to be accessible. So we'll see how that goes, right? In that world. I'm sure there was something very specific I wanted to talk about and I forgot, but we're still going to end up talking about something that I believe I briefly touched on in a previous episode, but I guess I want to go further in depth into it now. Although I'm a little cautious too, because at the same time, it's something I'm going to talk about in the video I make today. So I'm not really sure how much sense it'll end up making to do that. I mean, we'll have to see, right? But yeah, I guess I feel like talking about it. I'll talk about it. Maybe I'll be more in depth here, or maybe I'll find a better way to explain my thoughts and whatnot when I say it now, and then in about 2 hours or so when I actually record it, I'll have it a little more figured out. I think when you're talking about the morals and the coming and present moral dilemma that exists, where there is obviously a problem in this country when it comes to costs of healthcare being too high, costs for a lot of people's everyday expenses being too high. And it's common on the left that this is a huge paramount issue, which I agree that it is. But I guess the premise of how people go around handling it, at first, when I became aware of it and the argumentation of it, it made a lot of sense to me. Like, yes, there should definitely be a bare minimum living standard and all this. And yes, it's true. Things are worse now than they were. So there should be maintenance of these things, and for health insurance and all this stuff, there should be a guarantee that somebody can just live normally. Correct? It shouldn't be that some people get enough money to do whatever they want, and then some, and then other people are just struggling to pay basic bills. It's a pretty common concept I'm trying to quickly sum up and overlay. I'm sure it's been beaten like a dead horse over most people who are listening. Although, in my experience, I just want to note, I have looked into it, and it doesn't really seem like taxes or health insurance or it doesn't seem like taxes. Sorry, it was just stopping. It doesn't seem like health insurance or taxes are really that different between here and Canada. It seems like roughly the same cost. I could be incorrect. I mean, I haven't thoroughly looked into that, so I guess I shouldn't be claiming it. But when I did look into it briefly, it seemed like costs were about the same, except Canada's prices are astronomically higher. So actually, it seemed like it would be worse to live in Canada than America. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I don't know. I don't think I said this on video before, but I think being healthy and living in America is a pretty ideal situation. Being healthy and lucky and living in America. It's probably the best place to live if you qualify for that. But of course, if you do have to pay for insulin or have other medical ailments and things, it can get very costly in America. And so you'd probably be better off in another country, if I had to guess. But for somebody who's smart and healthy, America's probably the best country to live. I'm just kind of guessing here. I feel like that's true. And I'm not saying I feel as in a guess. I'm just based on my comprehension of things. I think that's a pretty accurate metric. Now, I've always been aware of, and I never hear left-wing people talk about it much, but I've always been aware of it, and it's that a lot of the cost in healthcare going up is attributed to people taking worse care of their health. So people are less healthy nowadays, and so that puts a greater strain on the system at large, and then that obviously leads to a greater health cost. In addition to that, there's things like the fact that there's so many more old people in proportion to young people now, which is putting a huge strain on a lot of these medical things. There's also been many cultural shifts where people in the past, and I think I've talked about this before on the show on some of the earlier episodes. I mentioned how my dad said his grandpa just never went to the doctor at all. And, one day, I think he had a heart attack mowing the lawn or something and died, which, I'm not saying that way of living is superior, but I'm saying that nowadays the standards have been raised a lot for regular people, and I don't know that people are exactly cognizant of that, because there were, and probably for most of human history, you were not just able to chronically go to the doctor. I don't think that was the case. That would have been something that was more of a luxury that a wealthier class could afford. And of course, for a period of time, we had this golden era of population burst. Obviously, you had huge surges in population, and that makes things work out because it puts less of a... When you have population surges, it's going to create a system that makes a lot more sense and works very well, because the system, it's just that tricky intersection, and since I've been leaving later, it hasn't usually caused me issues, but now it is, because there's more cars, because I have to leave early for a specific reason that I'm still not disclosing. It basically, I think a lot of the prosperity of that era can be attributed to that. There's also greed. I'm not going to deny that I agree with a lot of the... Well, I don't know how much there really is to agree about it, because I do think it's the truth, and I think it's what a lot of left-wing people get completely correct, is that the economy was a little bit more left-wing in the 60s, and the way the taxes were and everything have been eroded over time. So that is true, and that's important to keep in mind. But another thing that is not really mentioned too much is the population issue, and that is a very true and important metric. So not only were older people back then not remotely as system dependent, as I said, a lot of people didn't even take medication, even if maybe they should have. A lot of these costs were not there. People just didn't really bother with a lot of this stuff. I mean, some people did, I guess. But a lot of people in the past, I don't really think they went to the doctors as much. Now, again, this is probably something I wish I could vet as I'm talking. So forgive me if it's inaccurate. I don't want to act like I'm speaking with absolute authority, but I do think it's pretty safe to say I'm correct in the sense of medication use and doctor's visits were probably just so much lower in the past, and I guess that was due to people naturally living healthier lives. Just automatically, there wasn't as much freedom back then, so you didn't have as much freedom to be wrong, and there wasn't as much of a parasitic environment and economy to navigate. I've talked about that before, right? I think that's been one of my main points about acknowledging and addressing that we live in a very toxic environment. It's not just about wages. It's because if you're highly disciplined, and this is kind of the point I was getting to, I think you can make it in this economy. You don't do anything fun, and you just go to work, and you hyper-optimize all your expenses, right? You probably can get by in this day and age. Now, it's going to be tricky, but there's been a lot of standards that have artificially been given to people, and it was coming from that perfect time where, yes, insurance was affordable. Yes, people went to the doctors. But now we're seeing that that's not accessible for all people. And, of course, wealth inequality is referenced as the main cause. And I'm not going to try to diminish that. I'm just adding in these other things of, you realize how much lower health insurance would be if people were healthier? It would be so much lower right now, even with all the system in place the way it is. So much lower. Do you know how much lower car insurance would be if people drove carefully? And again, same system, same corruption that's in place now, it would cost less. It just would. There's no way they would get away with charging the same. Now, again, hypothetically, if they did end up charging the same, that would be a problem. But I don't think that in any of the left-wing discourse I've heard, people talk about personal accountability being an issue, which it is. I mean, and I guess that's something that really hits home for me, is that if you're going to have systems that are more equal and more fair, accountability has to be even higher. Because it's not fair to have a system that could be more easily mooched off at the expense of the working class, right? I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to, is people have to work to create a lot of these welfare systems, and it puts more strain on people. And I don't know how fair that is, right? I guess we've talked about that before. And I don't know that I ever really hear the accountability. I mean, to be fair, I don't hear the accountability thing either from Republicans or Democrat. Like, I don't, no politician talks about it because it's a losing point to make. If you, as a politician, tell people the problem is they need to be healthier, you're not going to get many votes. So Trump has never said that. Kamala never said that. And I just think it's mostly the truth. I think at the end of the day, that is most of the problem. Although the idea that things are getting too expensive, it does have credence. I don't think it's not mentionable. I think it's probably about 40% or even 40-something% of the problem. But I still think that just people's irresponsibility and ignorance is still the bulk of why things are the way they are. And it goes back to what I said about people voted a certain way to get here. So I don't really understand. I mean, you can argue it was manipulation from the wealthier class and all that, but people still fell for it. So I don't know why now it's a problem. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I feel like, again, we're at where we're at for a reason. I think it's very karmic that we're here and that things are the way they are. I don't think it just happened overnight. Humans are ignorant. And so the moral question I ask is that why do we need to rely on the billionaire class to look out for us? It's basically, do you think that most people would not do similar things if given the chance? I don't think everybody would. But then again, not everybody may have the intellect or the get it done kind of attitude that a lot of these entrepreneurs have. And so I think that obviously needs to be addressed too, right? I think people are where they're at for a reason. I don't know that if Peter Thiel decided that what he was doing was evil, that he wouldn't have done it because somebody else would have done it. PayPal getting created was an inevitability. It was just about who was going to be the first person to think of the idea and who was going to be able to execute it. Because if he didn't do it, I'm sure somebody else would have done it. And then, I mean, would that person have been morally superior than him and came up? Well, then, if they were morally superior, maybe it wouldn't have taken off because they had to use that aggressive strategy to get it up and running. You get $10 and then for signing up, and you get $10 for every friend you refer, in order to aggressively put it in the position that it got to. So if somebody kinder and more ethical was at the helm of PayPal, what if the business would have failed? I guess I also see with AI it being a similar thing. If America is not the one to do it, another country is going to come along and do it. Humanity will do it. There's no incentive or there's not enough incentive for humanity not to. At least in my estimation. And again, if America decided that we're going to be all anti-AI and wholesome and TikTok's going to get deleted and Meta's going to get deleted, what is going to stop another country from just doing the same thing and eventually it would end up winning out? No, I think AI is an addictive force that is unstoppable. And I don't think it matters who is doing it. I mean, if Peter Thiel didn't make Palantir, I'm sure there would have been somebody else even just a few years later to do the same thing. It's not... I just don't understand how we can vilify progress or vilify inevitable changes. And I would say, to kind of try to orient this the other way around, we can talk about social issues, because I think that correlates here. Because I've been talking a lot, I guess where I'm falling into is, Thiel is obviously right-wing on economics, so I'm going to try to pivot it from a left-wing perspective, too. It's also like when conservatives might whine about certain social or cultural progressions that they see as bad or anti-traditional. You can't really stop those things. Like, they occur. That we are experiencing the human experiment as we see it. And so if gay marriage ends up getting legalized, for example, you can't, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to stop that? It obviously happened at the time it was supposed to. I don't know. You can't, how much can you whine and complain? It's progress. In some ways, you could argue it would just be delaying the inevitable to continue, because at some point, younger generations would probably want it, even if it hadn't gotten legalized when it did. You can't control progress or what is or what's going to happen. I think it's been very clear for a very long time, at least to those who were paying attention, that mass surveillance, AI, these things were going to exist and they were going to change the world. Period. And I don't think the person who implements them is evil, because they're simply fulfilling an inevitability. How is he evil? I don't understand. I think people have such a poor comprehension of the future and what needs to happen that they just end up vilifying the people that materialize it. And again, not realizing that a lot of this stuff was going to happen anyway. I think we're going to see a lot of it definitely in the 2030s. Huge changes when it comes to accountability and things like that, and rewarding people for driving properly or doing the right thing. I think we're going to see it, because everything will get tracked, and people who behave like lunatics online and just randomly ghost people and act nuts, there's going to be a consequence for that. And think about how much that's going to change humanity and how many problems that's going to solve. Now, an immediate counter argument to that I can think of is people will say, then the humanity of it's lost, because part of what makes a good friend is because they didn't have to do it. They wanted to do it. They wanted to be a good friend, and it came from somewhere within, not an external system doing it to them. And that is a pretty good point. I guess people may feel like in the future things are more fake, because people will basically just act better to avoid social repercussion. Although I think that is a delusional idea. I think that theory is delusional, and I think it's mostly rooted in modernistic delusion, honestly. Because in the past, people did hold people way more accountable. What your peers did, whether they were strangers or neighbors, mattered so much more. people were not as isolated and individualistic. And I do think people felt a social... I can't think of the right word. No, social necessity. People felt a social necessity to not do wrong, and I think, yeah, that probably was motivated by potential social repercussion. If somebody did something bad, they might get ostracized by whatever community they're a part of. And so this was... That was the case. There was punishment. And where we're at now, where there is this absurd level of freedom, that's unheard of. That's not normal. There's such a disconnection that people have. And so, yeah, you can romanticize that. And you can say, well, it's truly magical when things do work out because it meant a person truly wanted it to be there. But if I'm going to be honest with you, I think a lot of that romanticizing isn't even true anyway. I honestly don't. Because I don't think people are that deep even if they think they are. And I've just seen it in human behavior. And the bottom line is that if things continue the way they are, we're going to have a lot of problems. Whether it's allegedly nobody's saying it was disingenuous when in the past you cared about your neighbor and you held them accountable for something. And so they kept their lawn mowed and they kept their house looking nice and cleaned up because that was a mutual sense of accountability. Nobody complained about that. It was fine. It wasn't fake. I think people are basically claiming that stuff as a way to justify human decay, where it is true that if we operate more at our animal level, that we just don't care about stuff as much and just kind of let things go, let things slide, our infrastructure, It just all comes back to just such a utter nihilism, utter apathy to existence. And so I don't see any magic in that. And I'm not going to wait around and act like from the kindness and goodness of people's heart, things are going to change. No, so I do. I guess I'm going to stand tall with my assertion. It's not fake. It's not fake to have consequences in place that benefit and push society to higher heights. That's not creating fake people. What we have now is a disaster. It's not a good system. It has to change. It's not working. Socially, it's not working. And no, I don't think there's anything magical about it. I don't think there's anything magical about anonymity and freedom to just act crazy and to treat people really poorly. I don't think those are good people. And I don't think that a society like the one we have creates good people. I think it gives too much freedom and it causes problems. It doesn't work. It's not working. I don't know. We have to do something different. We have to, I think, have a sense of accountability. And I think that, again, comes back to the paramount issue with the system at hand, is that, yes, things could be a lot easier. There are genuine systemic problems for the lower and middle class. There are. I'm not trying to sugarcoat or diminish that. It's true, and it's not exactly fair. But on the other hand, I mean, what is fair? That we're in this situation now due to our own voting habits and awareness of things. I mean, we're talking about America. How many people care about voting? How many people actually vote? Of the people who actually vote, how many people put that much thought into it? What percentage of voters even watch the debates? Is this really a systemic problem, or is it a human problem? Is this just decades of nihilism finally catching up? Is it inevitable? If you created a perfect system, would it not lead to, tons of prosperity and comfort? But would that not lead to ignorant people? Which would then lead to just another system that's not, I mean, I don't know, right? Isn't this the cycles that occur? So I don't know what's fair. I don't know. I'm not sure that it's fair to complain. I'm not sure. It's a tough call, right? I don't know. It is something I didn't think I would get too deep with this, and now I'm talking about a lot of deep stuff I haven't exactly ventured in yet. So I don't know how much more I have to offer with the conversation, but I guess it is just that premise about fairness and how, again, if it's in the billionaires' hands to basically have to not give up their power, how is it unfair that they don't? I mean, they're technically entitled to it if they grabbed it. I guess you could make the argument it was unfairly taken over decades, or, that is a valid claim, but like I said, people let it happen. I mean, there could have easily been political movements in the U.S. to stop it and to snuff that out or tighten up regulation, and nobody ever did it. A lot of politics is sort of a joke, I think. I don't think people take it super seriously or have a deeper comprehension of what's going on. I don't think they do. And that's why we're here. I don't think it's because of systemic issues. I think that plays a role, but human psyche would overcome it. I guess unless you're assuming that... No, I still think if humans were really particularly capable, I don't think we would be in the situation we're in. But again, that's kind of my whole point. That's literally what I'm saying, right? We had the 60s. And the people from that era did not vote to maintain that, did not hold their politicians accountable. And so we lost it. We lost that level of equality through mismanagement, ignorance, mismanagement of people in power, mismanaging things, voters not being tuned in, a combination of all those things, really, right? It's not, I don't know that it's any one thing, but obviously something has been going wrong for a few decades, really. And I guess, I don't know, it just seems like if people can be exploited, I agree that they shouldn't as a moral and ethical thing, but at the same time, if you have democracy and people vote for their own demise, is that unethical? I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good thing to kind of reflect on, right? Oh boy. Oh, I don't think I'll have to turn around, but it just looks like... Okay, good. I'm getting lucky. I'm getting fortunate. Just looked like something happened. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not... Just like a bunch of people... Anyways, we're going to wrap it up soon. I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm still developing what my opinions are. I don't know if I'm always disclosing that. Don't like take something I said and think, "Oh, this is what he thinks." No, I mean, this is me just spewing. This is literally just I'm on my car ride spewing stuff that I've been thinking about. Now, a couple weeks ago, it was more aggressive in a different direction, but I don't know. Now I'm thinking this way. I'm just trying to navigate myself. You know, I'm only in my 20s, right? I have time to kind of solidify things, but I think it's, again, to reflect on things and to talk about things, figure stuff out is the most important thing. But I'm also thinking in the future, which is very different than... I guess it's important to note the framework that I'm thinking through, because I'm not thinking through the present and what's fair and best for everybody right now if we were to continue to be stagnant. Because that would be a very different answer if it was just about keeping people comfortable, keeping things chill. Would be a very different answer. But yeah, it has been another Car Rides Witchla. So is Binge-la, but now it's time for Bye-schla. See ya, schla!